Welcome back. You are now an expert on hemming and cutting, or at least you will be after this tutorial. For our second project, we're going to make a skirt with an elastic waist. It's actually very similar to the drawstring bag. We're going to use a very similar technique, but this time you'll have a fabulous skirt that you can wear. So what I have here is my fabric. I've set it up just like we just talked about earlier. I have my two selvage edges at the top. It's folded over. My fold is here on the bottom, and it's lined up so that the grains are in line. This fabric is perfect, and then we're going to use our basic sewing essentials to put it all together, as well as a strip of elastic. Let's get started. I'm just going to push all this aside. All right, so for this skirt, it's going to be 20 inches long, and the width is actually going to be the entire length of this portion of our fabric, so that we'll have lots of room to dance around. So I'm going to measure 20 inches out using a Sharpie so that you guys can see. You probably don't want to use a Sharpie at home. So this is 18 inches, so I'm going to add 2 inches to make that 20. So there's a 20-inch mark. 18 plus 2 is 20. All right, oops. So there's a straight line from there. Straight line down. All right, so we've got a straight line. That's all we need for this skirt. As long as your fabric is doubled over, I'm working with 60 inches of fabric, and that'll give you plenty. So I'm just cutting. You can use your rotary blade, your fabric shears, your pinking shears, as long as it's nice and smooth. Okay, so now we have a very, very long piece of fabric for our skirt. It might not look like a skirt right now, but it will very soon. And the first thing we want to do is open it up, and just like we did with our drawstring bag, we want to fold over the top edge twice. We're creating a tunnel for the elastic to go through. So I'm going to need the help of my iron right now. Let me get that out. Got my mini ironing board. My iron's hot. It's on a very low setting because I'm pretty sure this fabric is a synthetic and we don't want to burn it. Always test your fabric, guys. You never want to melt it. Ironing that. Then we're going to do it again. And this time we're going to pin it in place. Just very simple, folding over twice. So now we've pinned the length of the top of our skirt over itself. Now we're going to sew it. We're going to use the straight stitch, and we're going to catch right where the fold meets. So now we have the top length of our skirt is ready to go. Once again, you might be thinking, this skirt's pretty wide, but you'll see, it's gonna look awesome. Now what we're gonna do is put our sides together, our raw edges, and we're going to sew them up. Oddly enough, looks like one is longer. One side is longer, but that'll all fix when we hem it. Let's pin it. Always gotta pin. This helps keep the fabric in place. Another rule of thumb is you don't need the selvage when you sew. So I'm actually going to just cut that off, but I'll do it after I stitch. So keep that in mind. Selvage, that's going to come right off. Okay, so we just sewed the sides of our skirt together with right sides together. I'm going to trim my selvage off. You can do this too if you haven't done it. So I'm just slicing that off because I don't want it there. It's extra bulk, unnecessary. Okay, we're so close to being done. Now we have a full circle for our skirt. We still have to hem it and we still have to add our elastic so it'll fit you. So take your elastic, take your snips, gonna trim off any extra thread, always important to do, and we're going to cut a hole right next to where our where we sewed, right here. We're just gonna cut a little hole to catch, to make an opening on the outside or the inside of our skirt on both sides. That's so the elastic can enter it easily. There we go. Now I'm going to use this handy dandy tool called a bodkin. You don't need this. You can also use a safety pin. A safety pin will work the same way. What I'm going to do is grip my elastic here in the teeth of my bodkin and push this circular device up, and that'll hold it in place. So I push my bodkin in, back end first, or your safety pin, and the entire thing of fabric is going to go into the tunnel we just made, and we're just going to keep pulling all the way through. Something else to keep in mind is you don't want the end of your elastic getting lost in the skirt. So what I'm going to do is just pin it here, so when it starts to pull, it'll just stay right there. So I'm doing this all the way around. Okay, so we've reached our end. I am putting the bodkin through the other hole we made. I'm pulling it out. Might be a little tight. I might need to make this hole a little bigger so we can pull it out. I got it. So now we have, I'm going to take both ends. I'm unpinning this one. I'm taking both ends of my elastic. I'm going to just hold them together, pin them together so they now won't get lost inside of the skirt. And as you can see, now I have my gathered waist. And I'm going to play with it so it all kind of gets gathered evenly. And look at that. It's a little more. Looks to me like this side needs more gathering. So yeah, this is just a matter of messing with it until you're happy. That looks better. Okay, awesome. Now we want to try it on and know how big we want our elastic to actually be. Olivia, do you want to be my model? And could you just step into this, please? My lovely model Olivia is here to try on our skirt.
Looks a little big.
It's a little big, as you can tell, which is why we've gathered it, so it won't be. So I wonder, does that feel good or does that feel too tight?
It's great.
Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
You feel like there's room? Do you
Yep.
think it's too loose, too tight?
Perfect.
Okay, so she says it's perfect, so it's perfect. We're going to add another pin. I'll just use the same one. I'm gonna pin it where it's perfect. Okay, so that feels good? Awesome, thank you very much. You can now step out. Okay, so now we have the perfect size for our skirt. We're going to sew our waistband so that it stays in that size. So what I'm going to do over here on my machine is set the width, the stitch width to 4. I'm going to set my stitch length to 0. I'm going to make sure my machine is set to zigzag stitch. And I'm just going to place the needle over the elastic where I want to sew. Now we have a nice stitch that'll hold the elastic in place. Now I'm just going to cut the elastic so it's not in the way. Done. Much better. Now if it gets lost in the skirt, it's no big deal because it's already the perfect size. Something happened with my hem here. Not sure what, but luckily since it's just the bottom, if I slice it off, it's going to be fine. So I'm just going to take my rotary blade and cut that so it falls nice and even and flush with the rest of my skirt so it doesn't affect it at all. Now all we have to do is finish it with a nice hem. You guys learned a few different hems. We're going to use the very basic one. All you have to do is fold under and sew. So I already measured it on my model and we decided it was a good length. It looked like it hung nicely. So I'm just going to use a 1/2 inch, fold, pin, iron, and we're ready to go. So it's very similar to what we were doing earlier where you just fold it under 1/2 inch, press it flat with your iron. There we go, 1/2 inch all the way around. For the very basic hem. If you would like to try a more advanced hem, just go back to the tutorial and follow along. When it comes to this seam, we always want to make sure our seams are open so they don't get too bulky. And remember, the reason mine is so short, usually seams are either 1/2 inch or 5/8. Mine's short because we cut on the selvage and we cut it off. Now let's just top stitch that baby up. So I'm placing my fabric into the machine right at the seam. That's a good stopping point for us. And I want my needle to be just next to the edge. We already know it's 1/2 inch. So now my only concern is sewing straight and folding over as I go. Oh. Also, can't forget to reset our settings. We did that fancy stitch for the elastic, so now I'm just moving everything back to straight stitch, 2.5 inches, and stitch width of 0. As I do this, I'm constantly watching the edge to make sure it stays at 1/2 inch. All right, so there's your skirt. It is now hemmed to you, and it's the color of your choice, and no one else will have anything like it, which is what we always wanted. Our tutorial now is on seam finishes. We've been ignoring seam finishes up until this point, but now you will know how to put a nice professional finish on all of your garments.